Hello, I'm Harry Riley. Welcome to Harry's Tales. This is called Felix Norman and the Bully, a short story by Harry Riley. This story is fiction, and resemblance to anyone living or dead is coincidental. Felix Norman was small and undernourished. No matter how much he tried, he couldn't build himself up. Everybody said how bright he was, quick to pick things up, and receptive to instruction. However, this did not stop him being bullied. He was 13 and was bullied unmercifully in the classroom, not just by the big louts, but by the teachers, and one teacher in particular, the Bear. He was a physical training instructor and took a great delight in picking on Felix and making his life a misery. This would often start when they were stripped off for basketball in the gym. He would scoff at Felix's hollow chest and spindly legs, and would encourage the big lads to mock his feeble attempts at leaping for the ball. Bruce Hamilton was one of these bigger boys. Already nearly 6 foot tall, he was broad and a natural athlete. He led a gang that terrorised the school and in fact the whole neighbourhood. His followers clung to him for protection, and nobody had been known to stand up to him. Felix was utterly miserable. He didn't tell his parents or the teachers of his fears, and now Bruce's gang were demanding his pocket money each week. He gave in, and their demands became more outrageous. They'd already given him several beatings, and he had no one to turn to, as he made his feeble excuses to his parents about falling down the stairs from the upper science lab and being crushed in the mad rush to leave the premises when the bell went. He was feeling suicidal. It was a visit to see his old Uncle Ralph that was to turn his life around and unexpectedly solve all his problems from that time on. Uncle Ralph lived about 5 miles away, and he kept to himself, being a bit of a recluse. He was retired and lived alone apart from Whiskers, his scraggy old ginger moggy. Felix's father had sent him on an errand with a letter to do with some minor family business. Felix quite liked his Uncle Ralph, for he lived in a ramshackle old house and did not stand on ceremony. Unlike Felix's own home, where never a cushion was allowed to be out of place for a single moment. On this visit, Felix delivered his letter and slumped down dejectedly in a comfy chair that had just been hurriedly vacated by Whiskers. Ralph caught his miserable expression and left off making tea to sit opposite and find out what was bothering his young visitor so much. He had the insight to realise it must be something pretty serious and put his finger on the problem very quickly. "When I was your age, lad, I was not much bigger than you, and had the whole weight of the world on my shoulders. You don't have to tell me, but just nod if I'm right. You're being bullied at school, correct?" Felix felt the breath choking him as his head went up and down in one swift movement. Uncle Ralph put his hand on his shoulder, and in less than 10 minutes all the pent-up emotion came rushing out. His uncle listened without interruption, and then he started telling the boy about his career on the stage, as though he had forgotten all about his nephew's problems. Felix got up to leave, but his uncle restrained him and asked him to sit and hear him out. Ralph Harvey had been a solo artist, needing no paid assistance or props. His audience was an integral part of the act. He was a stage hypnotist, going by the name of the Great Marvo. It was at this point that Felix began to take an interest. It seemed the act consisted of hypnotising a member of the audience to find out that person's worst fears, their most terrifying nightmare, and to make them think it was happening before their very eyes, to the enormous enjoyment of the rest of the audience. Uncle stopped talking and looked knowingly at nephew, who understood perfectly the wonderful implications. Could you teach me how to do it, Uncle Ralph?" The answer was affirmative. "Yes, boy, it takes practice, and you mustn't try it on anyone until I say you're ready, and you must never let on how it's done, or we'll both be in the soup. But I will teach you all I know." He laughed, and it was the first time Felix had known him smile, as he continued, "It would be nice to keep my skills in the family, but listen carefully. You must not tell a soul. Not even your mum or dad, or I shall be in deep trouble for leading you astray." Felix went to school as usual, but now it was with a light heart, and he suffered the bullying and paid their demands almost cheerfully, without a word of protest, so that the bullies hardly thought it worth fun any more. He was easy prey. Uncle Ralph was as good as his word and found he had a willing apprentice. He taught Felix to speak a little more slowly, and to twist his wrist while using his hypnosis tool, which was a special bright coin that he idly flicked between his fingers whilst talking, in order to draw the subject's eyes to it until he became mesmerised. Soon apprentice became as good as master, and it was time for the real thing. Big Bruce Hamilton was first to benefit from Felix's newly learned skills. He was alone as he confronted the smaller schoolboy and demanded he pass over his pocket money. Felix willingly complied with his right hand, whilst flicking a coin through his left fingers. This was so unexpected that the bully was taken aback, and his eyes quickly glazed over. In a slow, lilting voice, Felix asked Bruce to name his worst fare. He did so, saying he was afraid of dogs. Felix told him he would forget this meeting until he heard him mention the word dog in class, and then he was to howl like a dog until Felix snapped his fingers. Felix could hardly wait for lessons to start the next day. He seized his opportunity when the bear was standing in for the absent music teacher. Felix was asked to name a little-known composer, and he made up a name and said the man was never seen without his dog. At the mention of dog, Bruce Hamilton jumped up, threw back his head and started howling for all he was worth. The whole class erupted into laughter. No one could stop him howling until Felix left his desk, walked casually up to the big bully, stood over him and snapped his fingers. Bruce immediately sat down, looking foolish and quiet as a lamb. Nobody ever bothered Felix again after that powerful demonstration. The bear also was a changed man, and kindness himself. End.